I'm going to do a quick tutorial to show you how I make my Wonky log cabin block on a muslin foundation. And it's built, the muslin foundation, the square, is 9 inches square. Once the block is done, we'll trim that down to 8 inches. I have a big pile of strips of fabric over here that I've selected beforehand. They're all pretty much pressed and ready to go. And let's start sewing. We will put these pieces down one at a time, starting in the center and going around in a clockwise pattern, adding piece after piece, making sure that they're nice and crooked as we go along. So we're going to start out with the muslin square, and to mark the center, I folded it in half and folded it in half again, and then I just finger press. And then when I open it up, I can see the center, and what I want to do, log cabin block always starts with 2 pieces. Here's 2 pieces of fabric. These are approximately 2 inches square, not quite perfectly, but they're close. So I'm going to take the first piece and I'm going to basically line it up on that center line, but I'm going to overlap that line by about 1/4 inch. That's my seam allowance. So I'm going to sew the seam right along where that line is and leave myself a seam allowance. You're always sewing right sides to right sides on top of the muslin when you're putting these pieces together. So I take the first piece of fabric, the small, almost 2-inch square piece, I take the second one and I put it face down on top of it. Then we're going to sew that seam right there. I'm using all 1/4 inch seams on this as I go around. I always trim my threads as I go, because I want it to be nice and neat, but I might skip that process to just make this video go faster. So let's pretend that as we go along, I've been trimming all my threads as I go along. So I open that up and I just do a quick little finger press. Now I do keep a hot iron next to me on the sewing machine. So after I do a few rows, I actually do hit it with the iron to make it nice and flat, and everything goes together more nicely when I do that. So the next piece, I have my next piece ready to go. So I'm going to sew it. Goes this way, it's going to go on this side, and I'm just going to put it here. I'm going to make it a little bit wonky. That's the secret to this, is you don't sew anything perfectly straight. So rather than sewing that perfectly straight along that edge of fabric, I've twisted it just a little bit so that I get a crooked line. And you can judge how much you want to do. There's no rules here. You can make it as wonky as you want, make it as straight as you want. I like it kind of in a midline of wonky. So now I'm going to sew that seam. And showing you what I do. Finger press that back, and then I'm ready to stitch the next one. So now the next one, we're going around clockwise. So the next one, here's one. The next one is going to be sewn on this edge. So we're going to sew it here. So I'm going to pick my piece of fabric. I have a really pretty bright colored piece, but the first thing I'm going to do, I do like to trim the bulk away as I'm going, just so that I don't have too much bulk inside this block, because it's going to be a little bit bulky anyway with the muslin. So I want to keep it as clean and as thin and trim as possible. So now I put that on. You can see that piece is just a little bit more wonky. It's just a decision. No rules. Do whatever you want. So then I'm going to stitch that. Get those threads out of there. And I'm just going to finger press that open. Every few rows, I'm going to take that to the iron and hit it with a press. Next piece, I wanted to add a pop of color in here. When you're sewing this, you just want to make sure that this piece that you're putting on covers the full width of this fabric. You don't want to be short like that. You want to make sure that you're covering at least the full width of fabric. Otherwise, you're going to have problems when you put the next piece on. So this is going to go on. I'm going to make it a little bit wonky. You can kind of see there. I've made it a little bit wonky, and that's what we're going to do. You want this block to be irregular, so you can make the different sides different ways wonky. There's no rules, like I said, and it's just fun. It's just great to have fun and create and make it up as you go. And I've never had one of these that turned out bad. This is a big wide piece, so, and it goes here. I sewed here, now this one, and now I'm coming over here. So continuing to move along to the right. I'm going to put that on nice and wonky. And we're going to sew it on. Okay, this is kind of a weird line, so let me show you this. See how this, if I put that straight across, it's not covering all those fabrics. So you just kind of have to make a decision. That's not a straight line, but this is. So you kind of have to make a decision on how you want that to fall. So I'm just kind of choosing the shortest line to cover all those pieces of fabric. You could make it a lot more wonky if you wanted to. I'm just choosing to be a little bit more efficient. This is one of my favorites. This is this beautiful plink. So I'm actually going to make that a little bit wonky because it's a beautiful piece of plink and I want more of it to show. So I'm actually going to cut that corner a little more so you can kind of see I'm making that pretty wonky. I'm going to cut off sew over quite a bit of that polka dot fabric. Absolute Brandon's Vibrations, and that's going to go on this edge. So we're getting really, really close to the edge over here. That's enough to cover that edge, so I'm going to be pretty efficient here. And I'm only going to use, I'm going to line it up pretty close with this line because I think that this piece is going to finish this side. So I don't want to make it too wonky because then I'm going to have to put another piece on it. So you can see that's almost covering that. We're going to trim off an inch. We're going to trim this from 9 inches down to 8 inches. So that's not going to matter. That little piece of muslin hanging over there, it's not going to matter. We're just going to trim it off. It's not going to be enough to cover what's left of this muslin. So I'm going to go ahead and go pretty wonky because I'm going to have to put another fabric strip on there. So I want to go all the way over to the edge. I want to sew this strip completely onto that muslin. So I'm going, don't have to go all the way over here. I just need to go so that it's over the edge of the muslin. This piece probably isn't going to fit that either. It does. It barely fits. It goes from corner to corner. That piece does fit. It goes from that corner all the way down to here. Covers that full line of fabric. So that means that it's big enough. We can go ahead and sew that piece on right there. I'm making it a bit wonky, not terrifically wonky. That on, it covered most of that muslin that was bare there. So now we just have a little tiny piece of muslin that's that doesn't have fabric on it. So that's going to be really easy to deal with. So now I need one more piece of fabric. What am I going to use? I'll go ahead and use this one. This is a beautiful fabric. So this is going to be big enough to finish this whole thing. So I'm just going to put it on here. So side to side, and that will be our last piece. See that all of the muslin is covered. And if you look at the back, you can see that there is fabric sticking out around all the edges or outside of the muslin. So there's fabric extending beyond the edge of the muslin. So that means that we have room to trim that. But look how beautiful that is. So let's go to the cutting table and trim it. All right, so we're here at the cutting table and we're going to trim up this block. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to trim it to the edge of the muslin, and that way we'll know where the edge of the muslin is. So when we trim it to 8 inches, we'll know that there's muslin behind everything that we're going to be trimming away. So I'm going to grab my ruler, and then I'm just going to, it doesn't have to be exact, it's just be kind of a rough trim. Trim off all 4 sides. Some of these is more trimming than others. Now we have it trimmed to 9 inches, and so now we're ready to trim it down to 8 inches, which is the size that's going to go in the bag. So you can see it's all nicely trimmed, it's square, it's ready to trim, and we'll know where the edges are. So what I use is I bought this ruler that's made for cutting arcs, and I bought it because it's 8 inches, and every other ruler I found is 8.5 inches, and I wanted something that was 8 inches, and I use this all the time. I never cut arcs, but I use it for cutting 8-inch blocks all the time. So I'm going to lay my block down right side up, and I'm going to lay that ruler on top of it, and it's clear so I can see as I rotate the ruler around, I can see what I'm cutting as a block. And so I can look at this, and because I trimmed that to the size of the muslin, I know that there is muslin foundation under everything. So I can just be as free as I want, not have to worry about getting muslin under there, and I can just cut it to any way that I want. So that's how I want it. I like the way it looks. Hold it down. I'm going to cut. So I trim off 2 sides, and then I'm going to turn it around and trim off the other 2 sides. You could use one of those rotating mats if you have one and like one. I don't like them. I don't use them. I think they're kind of a useless piece of equipment. For me, they are. I find that I move things more when I use those than when I do this. It's easy enough to line up. Okay, so all 4 sides are cut, and now the block is done. Look how beautiful it is. And we are ready to assemble this into our drawstring knitting project bag. You can find the link to that in the description of this video. Thanks.